this organization cannot get out of its own way. You're watching 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm Shea Sr. Appreciate all of you for being here with us. So much drama right now after James Harden at an event in China called Daryl Morey, quote, a liar, and said that he doesn't want to play for Daryl Morey again. This is wild, and we're going to break it down in full detail. Thanks for watching the show. So James Harden making these comments at an event in China. He was doing a Q&A with the audience members who were on hand, and when he was taking questions from people in attendance, he was asked about his current situation with the Sixers and Daryl Morey, and he doubled down on his comments that we're about to unveil here on the show. And this comes after a wild weekend of reports coming from some of the most notable NBA reporters who cover the sport. Adrian Wojnarowski said this on Saturday, that the 76ers had ended their trade talks on guard James Harden and planned to bring him back to training camp for the start of the season. The Sixers had periodic offseason conversations with the Clippers, and Harden's desired destination has always been the Clippers, but no traction on a deal materialized. Woj with more. Sixers and Harden agreed to seek a trade together after Harden picked up his player option for 2023-2024. That's this upcoming season, of course. But Philadelphia believes it has a championship team with Harden, and they want to find a way to make it work with him this season, sources said. Lastly, Harden has been emphatic in wanting a trade. So the Sixers are setting up an uncomfortable situation to start training camp. Ultimately, Philadelphia wouldn't make a trade that they believed would compromise their title hopes. And we know that Daryl Morey is going to wait this out as long as possible. Even now, he's still not willing to trade James Harden unless he gets equal value back. But James Harden clearly, in making these comments, does not want to return to the Sixers. He's going to hold out. It doesn't appear as though he's going to return to training camp, and we're entering a standoff here. But after those Woj quotes, you're thinking, okay, is James Harden going to actually come back? No, because Sam Amick of The Athletic, with this report over the weekend, after Woj had reported that and saying no matter what signals the Sixers might send when it comes to trade talks, a source close to Harden reiterated that the 10-time All-Star and former MVP no longer wants to play for Philadelphia and has no plans of taking part in training camp. So now we have this. After Woj said that, Sam Amick said that, Harden at an event calling out Daryl Morey. And when you think about what he said, the fact that he said it twice, reiterated it, between two men, this is a pretty serious dig here. And there's obviously emotional underlyings here with this situation because James Harden clearly feels as though he's been lied to and he's been betrayed by the guy who's been his biggest advocate for his entire NBA career, going back to when Daryl Morey traded for James Harden when he was a sixth man with the Oklahoma City Thunder. James Harden becomes an MVP player, one of the best offensive players of all time, especially in this generation. A guy who really put that franchise on the map. Then Daryl Morey reacquired James Harden. So for this relationship to enter this area of turmoil is pretty telling. And here's the quote from James Harden. I'm sure everybody has seen it at this point. Daryl Morey is a liar, James Harden said, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Now, there's so much to unpack with this. We're only getting started on today's show. But this is our poll question, and it's our pinned comment. So make sure you go on down and get those votes in. Whose side are you on here? Are you on James Harden's side? Are you on Daryl Morey's side? Let me know right now in the comment section. As you venture down there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're approaching 12,000 subscribers right here on 76ers Now. We have you covered with year-round Sixers coverage. I woke up, saw this tweet from Shams, and I said, we have to go live. That's the standard here on the program, and that's why you hit that subscribe button, so lock us in. My initial reaction to this, the Sixers can't seem to avoid drama. This has been a dysfunctional organization for a really long time, as we're about to talk about in further detail here. They've been pretty much dysfunctional my entire lifetime. Some successful years with Allen Iverson. Outside of that, though, they can't get out of their own way. This is also classic James Harden here, where he has become over time one of the most unlikable superstars in recent memory. And he's always been a polarizing player because he's kind of changed the way that the game has been officiated, the way that the game is played, because he plays at his own pace. He dictates the offensive style with how he approaches the game. And a lot of people disagree with how he goes about his offensive style of basketball. But there's also no surprise here with James Harden, because this is a player who, when he doesn't get his way, he pouts. This is now his third trade request with his third consecutive team. And this is also a player who's a superstar and a stud, and still at this point in his NBA career, a really good player who just led the NBA in assists, had the best assist-to-turnover ratio in his NBA career, second best three-point percentage, but continues to come up short in big games. And when he comes up short in these big moments, he never takes accountability. But look at the track record here with James Harden. He became one of the most generational superstars that the NBA game has ever seen with the Houston Rockets. But then once things derailed and went awry there, he pouted his way out of Houston. He demanded a trade. He got his wish. He went to the Brooklyn Nets, where he wanted to team up with Kevin Durant as well as Kyrie Irving. Things didn't go well there, so he demanded a trade from the Nets after KD, Harden, and Kyrie barely played together, and he ran into a lot of hamstring issues with Brooklyn. He wanted specifically to go to Philadelphia, the team back up with Daryl Morey, but also have a chance at winning a championship to be Joel Embiid's running mate. And they had some success, James Harden and Joel Embiid playing with the Sixers, but then he takes less money intentionally to return to Philadelphia last year. He was clearly unhappy as all the reports came out from Woj that he was thinking about leaving the team. He had a couple of good games in the playoff series against Boston in which he won Game 1, won Game 4, but then was a no-show in Games 5, 6, and 7 as he crumbled once again in a big moment, as he's done throughout his entire NBA career. And when he doesn't get his way with Philadelphia, he demands a trade out of Philadelphia. That's 3 different stops: Houston, Brooklyn, 76ers, 3 different trade requests. It's almost impossible to make James Harden happy. And the irony here is this: Harden wanted to go back to Houston this offseason. As soon as Houston brought in Ime Udoka to take over for Stephen Silas as that organization's new head coach with that new regime, the Rockets didn't want him any longer. James Harden then canvassed the market across the NBA. There wasn't a single team that was willing to give him the money that he wanted, the years that he wanted, and the contract that he wanted. As soon as James Harden realized that Houston didn't want him, and no other team was willing to give him the years and the cash flow that he desired, he opted into his contract with Philadelphia. And this is where player empowerment across the NBA becomes a little bit of an issue, because now James Harden opted into his deal. He's due $35.5 million, and now he's demanding a trade, calling Daryl Morey a liar and saying, I never want to return to the Sixers or a team that Daryl Morey is in charge of ever again. There's also more irony here, because Daryl Morey, for so long, even to a fault, has been overly loyal to Harden. He's been his biggest supporter. Traded for him while running basketball operations with Houston, traded for him again with Philadelphia, brought him back, and the guy that's been his biggest advocate in Daryl Morey, Harden is now severing his ties with him, and it seems as though he no longer wants any type of relationship at all with this biggest fan. And between two grown men, this is bold of Harden to do. I see why he's doing this, and I wonder if Damian Lillard is taking notes, make it as ugly as possible so that you can get what you want. But to call another grown man a liar and to say that he never wants to play for him again after everything that Morey's done for him, trading for him twice, making him the highest paid player in the history of the NBA, that tells you all you need to know about Harden being in his feelings. And I think he's overly sensitive. Daryl Morey, though, can't escape blame in this entire situation. Did he pull back on his handshake deal with Harden under the table? Did he say that he was going to sign Harden to a long-term contract extension and then didn't, and that's why Harden is disgruntled? Daryl Morey has also continued to come up short throughout his entire tenure as a basketball executive, whether that be with Houston or with Philadelphia. He talks a big game, and then he doesn't back it up. And both Morey and Harden have consistently underperformed, failed to deliver, and are frankly both overrated in my opinion. Is James Harden a special player? For sure, but he's overrated. Is Daryl Morey a good executive? Yes, but he's overrated. He hasn't really done all that much in Philadelphia as far as success because this is an organization that has not made it past the second round of the playoffs since 2001, yet they have one of the highest payrolls across the NBA. Now let's segue to this. Where do the Philadelphia 76ers go from here? The season is 2 months away. Joel Embiid has said he wants to come into this year in the best shape of his life. He wants to prove that he can get this Sixers team over the hump and pass the second round because he understands the pressure that comes along with him coming up short in the playoffs. At least he's being somewhat accountable, whereas James Harden is not. And I wonder what Joel Embiid is thinking here. He wants to come into camp in great shape. Now he's dealing with this. And if the Sixers go into this season with another Ben Simmons-like situation in which a point guard either doesn't want to report, is disgruntled, has bad body language, and this leads to a lot of drama, that is a distraction regardless of how mentally tough you are and no matter how you slice it up. This is going to be a black cloud over this organization. And it's unfortunate, right? Because Philadelphia hired Nick Nurse, a hire that I advocated for, a hire that I wanted to see happen. They finally made a good move at head coach, and now they're dealing with this. This is peak Philadelphia here. John Clark with this as well. I'm told the Sixers never had an agreement and never made an offer to James Harden or exchanged proposals with James Harden and his reps heading into this year's free agency. The whole Sixers plan here, and this is where this becomes problematic as well, was to open up cap space for next year. Harden expiring contract at $35.5 million. Tobias Harris expiring contract at nearly $40 million. That's a lot of cash flow to open up. $70 to $80 million for Philadelphia to go all in on trying to team Joel Embiid up and Tyrese Maxey with the superstar next summer. But when other players across the NBA seeing Harden this unhappy, calling him a liar because clearly Daryl Morey did something to bother him, will any superstar want to come to Philadelphia now? I think there's a chance it could happen because obviously players want to play with Maxey, who has that vivacious personality, and it's contagious. I love his energy. I love his play. I think that he could become a superstar in this league. And Joel Embiid is 29 years old, coming off an MVP season. But if Daryl Morey is an executive that a lot of people don't mesh with, and they don't F with, to put it lightly, are a lot of superstars going to think about coming to Philadelphia? That's a little bit of a problem, especially given the track record of this organization and the pressure that comes from the fan base, but also the media as well. And you look at that Sixers track record of dysfunction, this has been happening for a long time. And I said a little bit earlier, really my entire lifetime, this has been a dysfunctional organization that always seems to step in shit, and they can't avoid it. They had a couple of great years with Allen Iverson, but really, they made it to the finals in 2001. Outside of that, they were a pretty mediocre team that can never find a superstar for AI. A washed Chris Webber, a washed Derek Coleman, Dikembe Mutombo past his prime, Larry Hughes over Paul Pierce. The list goes on and on and on. But you look at this here. In 2013, they traded all-star point guard Drew Holiday in order to tank. And that started and kick-started the Sam Hinkie process. In 2014, they drafted 2 players who didn't play for Philadelphia. In 2015, they drafted a 3rd straight center, Joel Embiid, Nerlens Noel, Jahlil Okafor. In 2016, they hired the advisor's son from Jerry Colangelo to Brian Colangelo to run the team. And a lot of that pressure to hire Jerry Colangelo, who turned around Team USA, did some solid things with the Phoenix Suns. That was pressure from Adam Silver, which I disagreed with. I wish Sam Hinkie would have been able to see this through. But then in 2017, Philadelphia trades up with Boston, trading away a first-round pick, and they drafted Markelle Fultz over Jason Tatum. And Markelle Fultz, who was the consensus #1 player in that draft, all of a sudden lost his ability to shoot. He lost his mental confidence. and then the Sixers had to trade him away for a bag of peanuts. In 2018, Brian Colangelo, with a burner account on Twitter, was caught trashing Joel Embiid. He was then fired. In 2019, the Sixers traded for Jimmy Butler. That move worked. Joel Embiid was happy. He finally had his running mate and his co-star. Then in 2020, Philadelphia fires their head coach in Brett Brown. They hire a new head coach, and then they hired a general manager. That is a backwards process here that no quality business would take that path. Usually you hire a general manager so that he can hire his guy at head coach. So these recent moves with Colangelo trading away Jimmy Butler and then the whole Elton Brand giving that contract to Tobias Harris, they do the backwards process here in 2021. Ben Simmons demands a trade. In 2022, Philadelphia is investigated for tampering because they brought in players to appease James Harden, who no longer wants to be here. And now you fast forward in 2023, and you're looking at another star point guard, perennial all-star in James Harden, who's demanding a trade right now. This is very familiar territory for Philadelphia. This really is the Ben Simmons situation all over again. Ben Simmons becomes unhappy, he demands a trade. James Harden is unhappy, he demands a trade. Now, Ben Simmons did report to training camp a couple of years ago. He stopped trying. He didn't give a shit. So Doc Rivers sent him home. And now, James Harden, is he going to return to training camp? And if he does, you can bring out the fat suit jokes once again because he might clearly try to come into camp overweight, out of shape, so that he can force the trade once again. And Harden's plan here is clearly to make this as messy as possible just so that he can get what he wants. And that's to play with the Los Angeles Clippers. But you know Daryl Morey is not going to give in. Mark Stein with this. We appear to be headed for quite a standoff since league sources say that the Sixers remain determined to trade Harden only if they find a deal that keeps them in the title mix. Here's the problem with Harden, though. Daryl Morey wants a lot back for a guy who had a pretty solid season last year, but James Harden is a declining asset, and he doesn't have a lot of value out there. No teams wanted to give him a multi-year deal worth a max contract, and now there are very few teams who actually want to trade for James Harden, and he's not even the best trade asset out there. Damian Lillard is. And then you talk about the player. Harden is clearly declining. In 2019-2020, his last full season with Houston, he was really good. Led the NBA in scoring. 34 points per game, 7.5 assists, 6.5 rebounds, 35.5% from three. It is pretty notable here that when Harden came into camp out of shape and looked to be overweight at the start of the year, that's when his numbers declined. 24.5 points per game, still a really good distributor at nearly 11 assists per, 8 rebounds, 36.5% from three. His tenure with the Brooklyn Nets does not last long. He gets traded to the 76ers. Those hamstring issues continue, and the numbers continue to plummet. 22 points per game, 10 rebounds, under 8 or 10 assists, under 8 rebounds, and 33% from three. He was in a little bit better shape this past year. Led the NBA in assists. His three-point numbers went up. Second best mark of his career, 38.5%. And yes, you have to contribute the decline in numbers to the fact that he's played alongside some really good players. So he hasn't been asked to be the scorer that he was with Houston. And in playing with KD, Kyrie, and Joel Embiid, your scoring numbers are going to go down. But there's also analytics that point to James Harden declining as an athlete too, because his explosion is starting to go away. And other teams are taking note of this. Harden averaged 13.5 drives to the basket per game this past year. That is 10 fewer than he did 5 years ago. So he doesn't have that explosiveness or the finishing ability around the rim. He scored fewer points off those drives than he had since 2013-2014. A career low, 25% of his shot attempts came at the rim. Second Spectrum tracks a stat called blow-by rate, a measurement of how often a ball handler dusts his defender off the dribble. In his last full year in Houston, Harden blew by his defender 10.1 times per 100 drives. Last year in Philly, that rate was down to 3.7 per 100 drives. That is pretty telling, and it goes to show you that he is a declining player who can't finish around the rim as well as he did, can't blow by defenders like he used to, and some of that athleticism is starting to go by the wayside here. Now let's round out today's segment with this. James Harden is not a real one. But if you are a real one, let's do a real one roll call and give me a real one down below in the comment section.